Please let me go, sir. Don't you fear God? I'm like a sister to you, she pleaded with folded hands. I have only one sister. The rest of you are just playthings, girl. Fear flickered in her eyes, her face an image of helplessness. Once again, she gathered her courage and said, For God's sake, don't take advantage of my situation. I swear on your sister, please let me go. He laughed cruelly, replying, Don't mention my sister. She's nothing like you. People like you are only for passing time. She broke down in tears and tried to retreat, but he grabbed her wrist tightly. Stop. Don't even think of running, or it won't end well. For a moment, she steadied herself. Fear mingled with defiance in her eyes. People like you are the reason lives like mine are destroyed. God is watching, and one day you'll have to answer for this. Her words silenced him for a moment, but then he smirked bitterly and said, People like you forget too quickly that it's not justice, but power that prevails here. She was completely helpless in front of me. In my rage, I gripped her arm tightly and threw her onto the bed. She screamed and shouted, but I ignored her cries. Her eyes reflected fear and helplessness as she begged, For God's sake, leave me alone. Please don't do this. But I was consumed by a fire of revenge and dominance. She struggled with all her might, but her resistance was futile against me. I tore away her scarf and flung it aside in disdain, attacking her like a savage beast. I leaned in close to her face. She was a stunningly beautiful girl, only 14 years old, but she looked like a grown woman. I was getting lost in her presence. At first, she resisted my every action, but then she closed her eyes. I unleashed all my brutality upon her, venting every ounce of anger. For the first time, a young beauty had fallen into my hands, and I kept her in my embrace throughout the night. She cowered in fear, trembling as if I were a monster who would devour her. In truth, I was exactly that, a beast who showed no mercy even to a 14-year-old girl. All night I made her the target of my lust. She cried and pleaded, but I ignored every word. Morning came and I saw her wiping away tears, sitting in silent despair. Her quiet demeanor gave me pause, as if chains had suddenly bound my feet. The room was filled with an eerie stillness, and strange thoughts began to creep into my mind. The intoxication was gone. I was overcome with shame for what I had done. My conscience screamed at me. What have I done to that young girl? I sat down, clutching my head in anguish, and wept uncontrollably. She simply looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I mustered the courage to admit that I wanted to apologize, for what I had done to her was unforgivable, even in the eyes of God. I mustered up the courage and told her, It wasn't my intention to scare you. I spoke softly, but perhaps my words didn't reach her. She kept looking at me with pleading eyes as if seeking shelter. For a moment, I felt a tenderness stir within me, and I took a deep breath. The helplessness and innocence in her eyes made me feel ashamed of my behavior. You can go, I said, stepping back. She looked at me in astonishment, as if unable to believe what I just said. I nodded and added, Yes, you're free. She quickly picked up her things and slowly made her way to the door, wrapping her shawl tightly around her and covering her face. I don't know how many wounds my lust had inflicted on her. She left the room and an eerie silence fell over the space. But this silence was heavy enough to weigh on the heart. I was overwhelmed with regret. What I had done was a grave sin. This was worse than anything I'd ever done before. I couldn't understand what had happened to me last night. I kept berating myself. I wanted to escape my remorse, so I quickly left the room. As soon as I stepped out, I saw Manur, the girl I had wronged so terribly, now dressed and busy at work. I went up to her and warned her sternly, You better not tell anyone what happened last night. She stared at me, wide-eyed with fear. I threatened that if she told anyone, I might treat her even worse. She stepped back, terrified. I looked at her with a sarcastic smirk. Just a short while ago, I had been filled with regret in the room, but now, seeing this girl again, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This had never happened before. Usually, once I'd used a girl, I never looked back at her. But today, something was different. As soon as I left the room and saw her, I lost control of myself. My steps moved toward her of their own accord. She was fearful, engrossed in her work, as if she'd been scared all night long. I warned her again, laughed harshly, grabbed my car keys, and left. On the way, my girlfriend Gia called me. She asked, "Where were you last night?" "Why? What's the matter?" I replied. "I called you so many times, but you didn't pick up even once." "What were you so busy with?" she asked. "Don't ask," I said. "I'll tell you later. I'll just say that it was the most beautiful day of my life, and I'm very happy today. But don't ruin my mood by getting angry." I hung up angrily and leaned back in my car seat, closing my eyes. That night's scene played over and over in my mind. I tried to shake off the thoughts, but it was useless. I kept losing myself in thoughts of that girl. I don't know what had come over me. Her face and her closeness refused to leave my mind. Before I had spent time with the most beautiful women, but after last night, something had changed. The pleasure I experienced was unlike anything before, and its intoxication wasn't fading. I rolled down the car window, and the cold air hitting my face brought me back to reality for a moment. But still, a sense of unease lingered deep in my heart. I tried to control my thoughts, but the frightened face of that girl and her silence kept flashing before my eyes. Perhaps for the first time I had left a girl in such a state and still felt a strange pull toward her afterwards. My heart kept saying that maybe I should go back to her, but another part of my mind kept holding me back. I tried to distract myself by playing some music, but her image overpowered every sound. In the end, I decided that meeting a friend might help me get out of this mental state. I called Gia again and asked her to meet up. Her tone was still annoyed, but I managed to convince her to come. When we met at a cafe, the first thing she asked was, "What's wrong with you? You've been acting strange since last night." I tried to keep some things hidden, but Gia's penetrating gaze forced me to admit that something had happened which left me feeling unsettled. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and curiosity and asked, "Is it something serious? Are you hiding something from me?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not sure why this is happening, but something doesn't feel right." Gia fell silent. Perhaps she saw something in my eyes that I couldn't put into words. Placing her hand gently over mine, she said softly, "Whatever it is, just leave it behind and try to move forward." After a moment of awkward silence, I took a sip of coffee, hoping it would clear my head. Instead, the memories of the night before came rushing back. I closed my eyes, leaned back in my seat, and tried once again to shake off the thoughts, but it was futile. Over and over, her face, her presence, her innocence filled my mind. Although I had spent time with some of the most beautiful women in the past, something felt entirely different this time. The pleasure I had experienced that night was unlike anything before, and it lingered on, refusing to fade away. Gia interrupted my thoughts with another phone call. "If you don't want to tell me, that's fine, but stop ruining my mood. It's been a week since we last met." "Come on, let's go have some fun," she said. Her words sounded frustrated, yet I couldn't muster the energy to care. My heart felt as if it had grown weary of everything, everyone. In a cold tone, I replied, "Gia, I'm really exhausted. I just want to go home and sleep." She was clearly upset by my response. "Fine," she said curtly. "I thought you might at least enjoy some coffee with me, but never mind, I'm leaving. If you don't want to meet me, just say so." She grabbed her bag angrily and stormed out. I watched her go, then finally stood up and walked back to my car. Sitting inside the car, I lit a cigarette and turned on some music, trying once again to find some sense of calm. The first drag of the cigarette brought a slight numbness, but it wasn't enough to shake off the strange grip this memory had on me. Starting the engine, I pulled out onto the road, unsure of where I was even headed. As I drove, I kept replaying the same thoughts over and over. Her face, her eyes, the quiet way she looked at me. It all felt so haunting. I couldn't understand why I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just guilt, it was something deeper, something more confusing. Before I realized it, my hands had turned the car toward home. I decided I would confront her, ask her directly, "What is it that you've done that I can't forget you?" Maybe then I would find the answer I needed. As I took a drag from my cigarette, I drove on the quiet road. The city's lights blurred by, and I was lost in my thoughts, trying to push aside the haunting images that wouldn't leave me. Suddenly, a truck appeared out of nowhere. It was right in front of me. I hit the brakes hard, but I couldn't regain control of my car. Everything happened so quickly. The sound of screeching tires, the impact, it all merged into one terrifying moment. My vision blurred, then faded completely. I didn't even realize when I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I was in the ICU. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed harsh, casting an unforgiving glare. I blinked several times, trying to understand what had happened. The faint smell of disinfectant and the low hum of hospital machines made it clear that I wasn't at home anymore. I saw a shadowy figure leaning over me. As my vision adjusted, I recognized him. It was my father, Ahmed Mansour, the man I had always thought too busy and too distant to care about me. He had never once shown any real interest in my life. Yet here he was, his hand gently brushing my hair. I felt a pang of emotion that was unfamiliar, an odd mix of gratitude and sorrow. In the haze of that moment, it struck me that my father was here because something was truly wrong. Perhaps if he had been present in my life earlier, I wouldn't have ended up like this. The thoughts settled heavily on me, but I didn't have the strength to dwell on it. He spoke no words, and neither did I. It was as if the silence was telling its own story. But then a doctor entered the room. He looked at my father and said, "Mr. Mansour, I need to speak with you privately." My father glanced at me, gave a reassuring nod, and followed the doctor out. Left alone, I realized that my mother was sitting by my bedside. My mother, who was always busy with her social work, who rarely had time for me, was now here. She was quietly adjusting my blanket and brushing the hair off my forehead. Her presence was comforting in a way I hadn't experienced before. For the first time in years, I felt cared for. I wanted to say something, but my throat felt dry and I could only manage a faint whisper. Even so, seeing her there made me feel a little stronger. I had always been a reckless 19-year-old, a spoiled brat who thought the world revolved around me. With my family's wealth, I had never known what it meant to struggle or to respect others. I did whatever I wanted and never cared about the consequences. I lived alone in a grand house with only a servant and that girl, Manor. It was because of her, perhaps, that I had landed in the hospital. But at that moment, none of my old arrogance or pride mattered. My thoughts were only on the gravity of my situation. A while later, my father returned. His face was tense, his brows furrowed. He looked worried, more so than I had ever seen him before. Something in his demeanor told me that he wasn't just shaken by the accident. There was something he was struggling to say. As he walked closer, I tried to sit up, but I couldn't. My body refused to move. That's when it hit me. Something was terribly wrong. My father leaned in and softly called my name. Fahad. His voice wavered slightly. "Son, you need to listen to me calmly. What I'm about to say isn't easy, but it's the truth." My heart sank. I stared at him, willing him not to say what I already feared. "You won't be able to walk again," he said. The words cut through me like a blade. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to blur again. Not because I was losing consciousness, but because the weight of his words was too much. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg him to take it back. But all I could do was lie there, tears streaming silently down my face. A part of me hoped he was lying, or that he was mistaken, but deep down I knew he wasn't. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, steady but unsure. "The doctors will do everything they can. We'll find the best treatments, the best specialists," he said, trying to sound optimistic. But his voice lacked conviction, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. His usual stern demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked painfully like regret. The doctor returned a few moments later, his expression somber. He began explaining the extent of my injuries. "Your spine was severely damaged in the accident," he said. "Unfortunately, it has left your legs permanently paralyzed." The words echoed in my mind, each one hitting harder than the last. It was as if my entire world had come crashing down. All the plans, the dreams, the indulgent lifestyle I had taken for granted, they now seemed completely meaningless. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the physical pain or the realization that my life as I knew it was over. As I lay there, my mother took my hand in hers. Her touch was warm and steady. "Fahad," she said softly, "you're strong. We're all here for you. We'll get through this together." Her voice was kind, but it couldn't mask the sadness in her eyes. For a moment, her presence brought me a sense of comfort. I wanted to believe her, to hold on to her words and think that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. But the shadow of despair loomed too large. In the following hours, a heavy silence settled over the room. My parents were there, but the air was thick with unspoken emotions. My father paced near the window, his shoulders hunched. My mother sat quietly by my side, her fingers lightly brushing my hand every so often. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to escape. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I could pretend for a moment that none of this was real. But each time I opened them, the harsh reality was staring me in the face. I had never imagined that my life could change so drastically, so quickly. All those years of taking everything for granted, my health, my family, my privilege, now seemed like a distant memory. I didn't know how to move forward from here, and the thought of what lay ahead filled me with a deep, unshakable fear. As much as I wanted to believe in hope, I couldn't help but feel that the road ahead would be the hardest I had ever faced. Listening to their kind, loving words brought some ease to my restless heart, yet there remained a strange ache deep within me. I started silently cursing myself. Memories of all my past sins flooded my mind. Every moment I had wronged others, every girl I had betrayed. Mahnour's image returned to me again and again. Those terrified eyes, that haunting silence. It was as if her face had become a mirror reflecting all of my misdeeds. A deep sense of guilt began to take hold. For the first time in my life, I wondered if all of this was the result of my own actions. I had never valued anyone's dignity, love, or feelings, lost as I was in the intoxication of wealth, arrogance, and power. I had used people and discarded them without a second thought. Perhaps this accident was meant to teach me a lesson, to force me to confront the truth about myself. For a moment, Mahnour's face appeared vividly in my mind. She was staring at me silently, her eyes full of questions and pain. I silently promised myself, if I recover, I'll change everything. I'll apologize to Mahnour. I'll make amends for every wrong I've done to her. This resolution consumed my thoughts as I lay on that hospital bed. Just then, a soft knock at the door broke through my reverie. A nurse entered the room and said, "Someone's here to see you." My heart started pounding. For some reason, I thought it might be Mahnour. But in the next moment, fear gripped me. If it really was her, how could I face her? How could I look into her eyes after what I had done? I closed my eyes tightly, trying to prepare myself. I thought back to a time long ago, to a sunny morning when life seemed simpler. It was the day my father, Ahmed Mansour, received the news that I had been born. My father, always known as a strict businessman, a man who never displayed warmth or tenderness, had felt his heart soften in a way he had never known. That day, joy filled every corner of Ahmed's sprawling mansion. The sound of laughter and celebration echoed through the halls as he held his newborn son for the first time. Ahmed's friends and family gathered to share in his happiness, and even the household staff joined in the festivities. For a man who had spent his entire life focused on building his empire, that moment was transformative. In that tiny, innocent face, Ahmed found a new kind of peace, one that no amount of wealth or success had ever given him. Determined to give his son the best future possible, Ahmed spared no expense. He hired the finest doctors to ensure my health and arranged a lavish celebration to announce my arrival. Sweet boxes were distributed throughout the city, and Ahmed personally greeted friends, colleagues, and even strangers, inviting them to share in his joy. For the first time, Ahmed Mansour, the tireless entrepreneur, experienced what it meant to truly be happy. The sight of his son's tiny smile made him forget all the challenges and pressures of his business life. It was as if he had found a missing piece of himself. That day, Ahmed's home was filled with well-wishes, prayers, and love. Everyone celebrated alongside him, and for once he allowed himself to bask in the simple yet profound joy of being a father. But that joy, That sense of peace seemed a lifetime away from where I was now. Lying in the hospital, I couldn't shake the memories of my father's early pride in the dreams he had once nurtured for me. I knew I had let him down. I had let myself down. The grand entrance of the mansion was bustling with people, their faces lit with joy as they looked at Ahmed Mansour, who greeted every guest with open arms. Ahmed had organized a grand celebration, inviting every family member and close friend. He wanted the moment of his son's birth to be memorable for everyone. During the event, Ahmed announced his son's name, Fahad Ahmed. As soon as he uttered the name, the entire hall erupted with applause and heartfelt congratulations. The atmosphere was filled with happiness, and Ahmed wore a contented smile on his face. He felt that his dream had finally come true, a successor to carry on his legacy, someone who would inherit his hard-earned empire and continue his life's work. The night was a feast of color and fragrance. The glow of lights illuminated every corner, while the scent of roses filled the air. Ahmed Mansour's heart swelled with a renewed sense of hope in a world of dreams. He spent the evening envisioning his son's future, imagining the successes and triumphs that awaited him, and the thought kept him smiling. As time passed, however, Fahad, began to grow into a willful and headstrong child, contrary to my parents' expectations. Ahmed and his wife were so consumed by their busy lives and social commitments that they left me bereft of their affection and guidance. Ahmed, always prioritizing his business, rarely made time for family matters, while my mother often attended social gatherings, leaving me in the care of a governess. The governess did her best to look after me in her own way, but the absence of parental love and direction created an emptiness within me. Whenever I sought my parents' attention, I was met with disappointment as I found them preoccupied with their own affairs. This persistent neglect hardened me, making me more defiant and unyielding over time. If I wanted something, I would get it through sheer stubbornness. I began to believe that this was how life worked. Everything was mine for the taking, just as it had always been provided to me without effort. My parents' lack of involvement left me feeling entitled to act as I pleased. As a child, I would demand toys or fulfill my desires through the household staff. Yet even after obtaining everything I wanted, I felt a strange restlessness and loneliness. I could never share my thoughts with my parents, leaving a gap in my heart where their love and understanding should have been. Over time, my behavior only worsened. My attitude at school became increasingly difficult, straining relationships with teachers and peers. I had learned that I could get whatever I wanted simply by being stubborn. Deep down, I truly believed that everything was within my reach and that I answered to no one. My father would dismiss my obstinance, assuming that I would eventually outgrow it. However, the lack of proper guidance was leaving a lasting mark on my character. Without the right attention and support from my parents, I started associating with friends who were not a positive influence. Their company slowly steered me towards bad habits and poor choices. This circle of friends became a reflection of the void in my life, a void left by parents who, though present in my life, never truly engaged with me. As a result, I began to drift further from the dreams they once held for me and deeper into a lifestyle that threatened to destroy the very foundation of the legacy they had worked so hard to build. As Fahad continued down his unchecked path, with no one to set boundaries and his parents turning a blind eye to his behavior, the household staff were obligated to fulfill his every demand. This only fueled Fahad's descent into a lifestyle of indulgence. It began innocuously, with friends introducing him to smoking. What started as a curiosity soon became a daily habit. He saw it as a manly act, believing it gave him an air of sophistication. Since no one stepped in to stop him, the habit quickly took root in his life. Before long, smoking wasn't enough. His friends encouraged him to try drinking, something that at first seemed like just another thrill. Initially, it was simply a way to unwind or to feel part of the group. Over time, though, it became a regular evening ritual. Fahad started spending every night drinking with his friends, fully convinced that life had no limits, and he could live it entirely on his own terms. The more he indulged, the more this notion solidified in his mind. The downward spiral continued. By the time he was 17, Fahad began frequenting the red light district. What had once seemed unthinkable had become routine, pushed by peer pressure and his unbridled freedom. His heart grew increasingly desensitized to boundaries, and he viewed each new step into indulgence as a personal achievement. Fahad's life had become devoid of purpose. The pride and honor his parents once hoped he would carry now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by his reckless choices. Wealth, power, and his parents' neglect had blinded Fahad. His days and nights were consumed by hedonistic parties and gatherings where no activity was too unethical. He spent his money freely, chasing every new thrill and indulgence. Yet amidst the extravagance, a strange emptiness settled in his heart, one he tried desperately to fill with more pleasures and bad habits. What he failed to realize was that this void stemmed from a lack of parental love, guidance, and moral upbringing. But oblivious to these deeper truths, Fahad continued to drown himself in indulgence. The excess reached its peak when he started spending every night in different circles, chasing fleeting pleasures. His life had lost all direction, and he was steadily destroying not only his own future, but also the reputation of his parents. Fahad no longer cared about his health, his character, or the long-term consequences of his actions. What mattered most to him was the pursuit of temporary happiness, one that left a trail of ruin in its wake. Fahad's journey into decadence also eroded his sense of right and wrong. His moral compass had shattered. He lived in a world where indulgence was king and consequences were non-existent. He no longer recognized the difference between what was acceptable and what wasn't. Each day drew him further into a life that seemed impossible to escape. One night, after drinking heavily with his friends, they decided to take him to meet a woman known for her illicit activities. Fahad, too inebriated to resist, let his friends lead him there. They left him alone with her, and what followed was an experience that tore away any remaining fragments of morality within him. Intoxicated and surrounded by bad influences, Fahad crossed another line he never thought he would. That night, the woman's actions, in Fahad's own state of mind, led him further down a dark path. It marked a turning point in his life, a moment that solidified his descent into self-destruction. What he did that night wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It became a defining memory, one that would haunt him even as he continued to spiral further. This wasn't just a loss of innocence. It was a complete unraveling of what little was left of his conscience. After that night, it was as if a new chapter had opened in my life, one in which every day and every night there was a different woman. This indulgence became an addiction, a never-ending cycle that left me in a constant state of restlessness. I tried to drown this unease by seeking more women, forming meaningless connections that only pushed me further into the abyss. It had escalated to the point where I no longer knew how deeply I was sinking into destruction. One night I met Gia at a hotel. Her beauty and innocence immediately captivated me, and at that moment, nothing else mattered. My thoughts were consumed by the fleeting pleasure of the moment and the desire to satisfy my cravings. All I wanted that night was the intimacy of another woman, and Gia, with her captivating allure, drew me in at first glance. Without hesitation, I decided to take Gia to my hotel room. Enchanted by her charm, I treated the encounter as just another routine in my now morally bankrupt lifestyle. To me, it was merely another night, another opportunity to indulge. But when the night's intoxication began to wear off, reality set in. I realized Gia, too, was connected to the red light district I often frequented. This revelation left me with a strange mix of unease and emptiness, as if I were trapped in an endless cycle. As days turned into weeks, my desires grew more insatiable, like an uncontrollable fire consuming everything in its path. Each night I sought a new face, a new woman, but I never found the peace or satisfaction I was chasing. Indulgence had become the center of my existence, and this never-ending hunger kept pulling me further down. This was no longer just a habit. It had become an addiction. When darkness fell, my restlessness increased, and I felt an overwhelming need for someone new. What once started as a pursuit of fleeting pleasure had evolved into a desperate attempt to fill a growing void within me. I was lost in a bottomless pit of extravagance and excess, trying in vain to escape a hollow feeling that nothing seemed to cure. My life was empty and aimless. During the day, I put on a facade of normalcy, but when night came, I would unravel, giving in to my cravings without hesitation. I knew I was walking a path from which there seemed no return, yet even that knowledge couldn't stop my relentless desire. After every night of indulgence, I felt more disconnected from myself. My conscience began to weigh on me, but instead of facing it, I buried that guilt under even more indulgence. Each night led me to deeper moral decline, and I was shackled by an insatiable hunger that hollowed me out from within. One night I spent hours drinking heavily with friends. As the alcohol coursed through my veins, my desires took hold of me again. I felt the urge for another woman's company and decided to set out to find someone for the night. When I couldn't find anyone, I reluctantly returned to my car and began driving home. My parents were out, and Aunt Shakila was also away with my mother. At home, only Manur and Rahim Chacha were present. When I arrived, I encountered Manur, a girl of only 14. Her innocence and purity lit up her face like a blooming flower. Her large, dreamy eyes shimmered like a tranquil lake, their gentle gaze exuding a rare blend of purity and childlike wonder. Her long black lashes framed those eyes, and her soft, rosy lips held the faintest smile, as if someone had whispered a joke to her in a dream. Her cheeks carried a natural blush, her fresh-faced beauty so captivating that it was impossible to look away. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, swaying lightly with each movement, adding an enchanting quality to her already radiant presence. Her soft, clear skin glowed like a newly opened flower at dawn. At that moment, I called Rahim Chacha and said, "You can leave for tonight. Go get some rest. Take the night off." My tone was calm, but my thoughts were anything but. Rahim Chacha appeared surprised at the sudden leave I gave him, something I had never done before. Still, he nodded and left without any argument. As soon as he departed, a heavy silence settled over the house. My eyes remained fixed on Manur, her innocence and purity pulling me in like never before. There was a naivety in her expression, something I had noticed before but was now oddly drawn to. Her presence stirred a strange restlessness in me, and my gaze refused to stray from her. It was as if her innocent face could somehow soothe the turmoil within me. Without a word, I grabbed her arm and pulled her closer. At that moment, I knew we were alone in the sprawling house. I led her into my room. She was visibly scared, her eyes reflecting fear and confusion. But none of that mattered to me then. My mind was clouded with the desire to fulfill my own wishes. Today, once again, I found myself in the presence of a young beauty, and I knew what I wanted. The moment we entered the room, I closed the door behind us, and my heart started to race. I was acutely aware of her nervousness, the hesitation in her movements, and the unease in her eyes. I told her, "Don't worry, just stay calm." I tried to reassure her, but the words rang hollow even to my own ears. My desires overpowered any rational thought, and despite her visible discomfort, I ignored her protests. That night, I crossed a line that I could never uncross. In my relentless pursuit of satisfaction, I subjected her to my whims and left her broken. My actions were unthinkable, and yet I carried them out as if it were just another night. The next morning, I found myself lost in thought, tears of shame and regret stinging my eyes. My mother, leaning over me, kissed my forehead and asked, "Fahad, what's on your mind?" Her gentle tone shook me from my thoughts, and I couldn't hold back my tears. "What happened, son?" she asked again, concern etched on her face. I replied, "I wish you had paid more attention to me. If you had, I wouldn't be in this situation." She looked confused. "What do you mean? What attention?" she asked. I hesitated, then admitted, "There was no one to stop me. I've become a monster. Last night I did something I know you'd never be able to forgive." My mother, taken aback, pressed me further. "What are you saying, Fahad? What did you do?" Slowly, hesitantly, I recounted everything that had happened with Manur. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and she took a step back, trying to process what I had just said. "When did this happen? How could this happen?" she finally asked. "If you had been around, you would have known." "I wouldn't have done this," I replied, unable to look her in the eye. As if on cue, Shakila Auntie burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. I knew why she was crying, even before she spoke. "What's wrong, Auntie?" I asked, feigning ignorance. She looked at me with fiery anger before turning to my mother. You may think we're poor, your servants, but that doesn't give you the right to play with our dignity, she said, her voice trembling. My mother, trying to diffuse the situation, placed some money in front of her. Here, take this and let's discuss it at home, she said. But Shakila Auntie refused. No, I need to talk about it right here, right now, she exclaimed, standing her ground. Just then, Manor entered the room, her frame shrouded in a white shawl. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from countless tears. The sight of her drained all courage from me. I couldn't meet her gaze, knowing full well that my actions had caused her unimaginable pain. I was drowning in a sea of guilt, and her presence was a constant reminder of my unforgivable crime. My mother, still in disbelief, turned on Shakila Auntie. What nonsense are you spewing? How can this be true? My son would never do such a thing. But Shakila Auntie didn't back down. You think we can't go to court? She said. My mother, full of indignation, retorted, What court are you threatening us with? The courts are ours, and so is the law. With that, my mother stormed out of the room, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. The air was thick with unspoken words, regrets, and accusations. I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of my actions, knowing that the road to redemption was now blocked. After everything, I caught a glimpse of Manor, and that deep shame I had felt earlier returned. I called out to her, but she hid behind her mother. I threatened her not to tell anyone, but deep down I knew this was not something that could remain hidden. She was just a 14-year-old girl, and the terrible thing I had done to her would have been obvious to anyone. Seeing Shakila Auntie in such a state made me feel even more remorseful. I summoned the courage to call her over, and though she approached with disdain, she came. I never expected this from you, she said, her voice laced with bitterness. I raised you in my arms. I was like a mother to you, and she's like a sister. You didn't even think to care for her. I stammered. Auntie, my words are stuck in my throat. I can't express what I feel. I looked at Manor again. There was something in her innocence that kept me shackled to my guilt. Summoning all my strength, I said, I will marry Manor. My father, Ahmed Mansour, entered the room, his voice booming. What nonsense is this? She's just a servant. I stood firm. I am the one who wronged her, and I will take responsibility. My father turned his anger on Shakila Auntie, hurling harsh words her way. It pained me to see her face the brunt of his rage. She's not at fault, I said, trying to rise. But my legs would not support me. As I struggled, I felt the storm brewing within me. Auntie Shakila's eyes were filled with both fury and sorrow. I could see how deeply I had hurt her. As she turned to leave, she said, You have ruined a young girl's life. This is not a small matter. My father asked again, What are you thinking, Fahad? How could you do this? I finally admitted, I know I've done wrong, but I want to make it right. Manor needs my help. I want to be the one to bring some positivity into her life. His face hardened. This isn't help. You're only making her life worse. Think about your own future, not hers. I silently wondered if I could really turn my life around and make a difference for Manor. My father's words shook me, but the guilt within me drove me forward. Father, I said, I understand I've made mistakes, but I can't forget what I did. I have to care for this girl. I was the one who wronged her, so I must protect her now. My father's expression softened slightly, but concern still lingered in his eyes. He sighed deeply. Fine, he said, but you must also think seriously about your own life. This isn't just about you, it's about this girl's future as well. Auntie Shakila nodded slowly. I just want this girl's dignity restored, and I want you to have a chance to better yourself. Hearing her words, I felt their weight. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I resolved to change my life and try to make amends. In the end, my parents agreed to the marriage, and I married Manor. Gradually, I began to rebuild myself. 3 years have passed. Now, at 22, I am a successful businessman and a Hafiz-e-Quran. Manor is 19 and happily by my side. I have asked Allah for forgiveness for all my sins. My past may have been filled with darkness, but that doesn't mean my present or future must remain the same. It only takes a few steps toward Allah to find the right path, and those steps have guided me to a better life.